So open your books, if you would, to page 356. At the bottom of that page, we see a chart. It's about death row inmates that were exonerated and freed. So in the chart, we've got different years and then the number of death row inmates that were exonerated each of those years. So I took those different numbers and I just typed them into Excel. I'd like to go over using Excel to find some of these different statistics that we've been talking about. So there is a whole video that I have linked that goes with your statistics spreadsheet project that talks about using functions in a spreadsheet. So I would strongly recommend that you go ahead and watch that. That'll give you a lot of helpful information. But we're going to be using some command functions, and there's several ways you could do this. Let's identify what we're going to find. Let's use Excel to find the mean, to find the median, the mid-range. Let's find the range, the standard deviation, about mode, and outlier. So notice how we're wider than our column here. I'm going to do this cool double click on the border thing to make it auto fit. And then I'm going to select the whole column and write a line so that it'll be real nice with our data here. Let's center that. That seems like a usable size. All right, so I would like Excel to find the mean for me. Sure, I could take all of those numbers and add them up in my calculator and divide by how many there are, but what if I had a ton of data? Excel will do that just as easily, whereas me doing it by hand would be harder. So there's several different ways that we could do this. We could just select the cell that we want, hit equals, and then if I know the name of that command, I could just start typing average, then do, oh hey, yeah, that is the one I want, so I'll click on that and it kind of tells me about it. Isn't that nice? And then select the range of data that I want it to find the average of, put parentheses on, hit enter, and it finds it for me. Now that is if I've used this command function a lot, that would be the fastest way to do it. Another way to do it is to click on this function symbol. It automatically puts that equal sign right there. And then in my formula builder box here, I'm going to search for stuff. Now, here's the most recently used. And for me, they are all what we are covering. But for you, maybe those aren't the most recently used. So I'm going to search. Now, if I search for mean, let's look and see what happens. There isn't anything. Excel calls the mean average, and even though we know that the word average can apply to a lot of different things, in Excel, average equals mean. So, average is what I want. And if you start typing what you want, it'll try to find it and get it to you. Okay, so our range that we want it to find, the average or the mean, is this collection of cells. That's good. Excel figured it out, and it's what we want. We make sure the parentheses are closed around the range. Okay, now for median, which I did not spell correctly. So let's fix that. Whoop, there we go. Median, great. Okay, to find the median, I've already got my formula builder box open, which is nice. If it were not, once again, I could just click on the f of x thing there. And I want median, so I start typing in median, and oh yeah, that's what I want, yay! There we go. Now notice, it's trying to include that mean number as part of my range. I don't want that. I just want those, my original numbers. There we go, 3. Now, the mid-range, remember the mid-range takes the highest and the lowest and just finds the halfway point between those. It doesn't matter what all the inside stuff are doing. It's just halfway between the biggest and the smallest. So, this one's a little more complicated. I'm going to press equal, and I want it, first of all, to find the biggest. The biggest is the max. So I'm going to start typing in max. Oh, yep, there it is. I could also go over here and look for it. Okay, the max. I want it to find the max of my original numbers. And then I want it to find the min. The smallest is the minimum, or min. So plus, and let's look for min. I want the minimum of all of those. Okay, now remember, we're trying to find the average value, the halfway point between the min and the max. So I need to find the average of those. That's why I've taken the max plus the min, and I'm going to put a separate set of parentheses around that because that's going to be the top of my fraction divided by 2. So one number, the max, which when we look at our data, that's going to be 12. But let's say I had a huge set, I didn't know what it was, whatever that biggest number is, and then whatever the smallest number is. It's going to add just those two numbers together. It's going to find them for me using those min and max functions and divide by 2. Now the range is just the distance from the smallest to the biggest, so I'm going to once again use max. Minus, now this is different. To find the mid-range, we were finding the average distance, so we added them together. But just to find the range, it's just the distance from the biggest to the smallest, so I'm subtracting. So max minus min. And I'm just manually typing these in because that seems easiest. So the distance from the biggest to the smallest is 11. Our range. Standard deviation is a function that thankfully Excel already has built into it because figuring it out by hand is time consuming. Even if we had lots of extra time meeting together in class, I probably would not make you find the standard deviation by hand because it's done so easily with technology, and it's so time-consuming by hand. If you're interested in actually how you would find it by hand, you can look through the pages of Lesson 4.4. It talks about it. But we're just going to practice finding it with Excel. So in my section over here, I'm going to standard deviation Oh man, it didn't find it. This is where typing a little slowly actually is a benefit. I know that the standard deviation command is this weird abbreviation thing, but you don't necessarily know that. On page 357, you'll find some of the functions that we've just done with these exact same numbers. It talks about finding the standard deviation on standard deviation, or standard deviation using a spreadsheet. In our book, on page 371, you'll see that STDEV. Now, you'll notice over here, we've got standard deviation dot P and standard deviation dot S. That's because there's actually two different kinds of standard deviation. We've got sample standard deviation and population standard deviation. If we were taking a whole course on statistics, we would talk about the nuances between those two. But for our purposes, we're just going to say we're sticking with sample standard deviation. So this guy with the S right here. Oh, now isn't that interesting? I clicked up here, and so it's putting all that stuff there because I clicked out of the box where I wanted it to. That's the kind of thing that can happen. I'm going to hit escape, and all that will be gone. And then I'll go where I actually want it. So let's choose the sample standard deviation. And I want it to find the sample standard deviation from my set of data there. Once again, that means that on average, our data varies from the mean by a little over 3. I mean, obviously they don't all. Some of them it's smaller and some of them it's bigger, but we kind of get a sense of how spread out it is. Now, to find the mode, there's a couple of different ways we could do it. We could go over and look for the mode function. This is giving me a notification about compatibility with Excel 2007 and earlier, which makes me wonder if maybe not everybody's spreadsheet programs has this function. So I could choose mode, I could select it, and 1 is the most frequently occurring data point. The other way we could do it is just to take our, especially for a smaller list, take our list and sort it. Now, sorting it is something that you will need to be able to do for your spreadsheet project. I'm looking around. Depending on how big your window is and what version of Excel you have, and all kinds of other things, it could be different places. But here I see this sort and filter function. I can also go to data, the data tab, and find that as well. I want to sort A to Z, biggest or smallest to biggest. Okay, so when you watch the video on sorting that I've got linked for you to go with your spreadsheet project, you'll learn all about sorting and how when you sort based on one column, if it's got other things attached to it on the side, it'll keep that stuff with it, and that's the sort of thing that this warning is asking me about. Oh, holy moly, that's not what I want. Command Z, undo. I did not mean to pick expand the selection. I meant continue with the current selection. That's what I want. Okay. Don't you love the undo button? I wish the undo button was available for more of my life than just computers. Like, wouldn't it be nice to just Command Z on a Mac or Control Alt? No, not Control Alt Delete. What is the undo on? We don't need that for this. Okay. So looking at my data sorted from smallest to biggest, it's really easy. All the numbers are next to each other to spot that there's the most ones. Also, having them in order like this makes it really easy to see, is there an outlier? Remember, an outlier is something that's just way far away. I don't think there is. Even the 12, that's close. If we had something like 103, that would be an outlier. So, none.